Hello, I'm Ann Arnold, and this is Mona El Yafi, and we are here again on another series of our interviews with women in the world of wine with Nova Cadamatre. Thank you for being here, Nova.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, Nova.
We're so excited to talk to you. And one of the things that is so impressive, learning about you, and I've discovered you through the Wine Scholar Guild, is that you are the first female winemaker in the United States to achieve the credentials of Master of Wine. So getting Master of Wine is amazing, something I aspire to. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to do it, but please tell us about your journey and what brought you to this place.
Oh my gosh, it's interesting because it's one of those things, like you said, once you find out about the Master of Wine, you're like, oh, that would be so cool. And I was in my first job outside of college. I went to school at Cornell University, and my first job was here in California. And it was at a very large winery, working with more entry-level wines. And I really wanted to be in the luxury side of things, and in the high-end wine world. And so I was looking around to see if there was some way to differentiate myself, or make myself more attractive to an employer that made different wines. And I found the Master of Wine, and I was like, oh, that would be really cool. And if I got that, then surely somebody will hire me to make really fine wine. And I had an office mate, and I said, oh, I just found this really cool thing. And I told him about it. He's, oh, nobody really does that. He says. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I can do it. I think I can do it, And so I started through the WSET programs and went through there, and then did my second year of my diploma and my first year of the MW concurrently, which I tell people now I don't recommend at all. And actually, I don't even think they let you do that anymore. But way back when I started this process, it was possible to do that. And so it took me 8 years to get through the exam. I sat the exam a total of 6 times, 4 times in its entirety, and then 2 or 3 times practical only. And so I actually failed out of the program and then ended up coming back. And the next time I came through, I had to sit the entire exam all over again. And then that was the time I ended up passing both sides. So I passed the theory the first time in 2012 when I was pregnant with my oldest son. And then I had 3 years of practical only. And after that, I failed out, lost my theory pass. And when I came back, I had to sit the entire exam over again. And that time I passed both. And so I was good to go after that. And then I did my research paper on barrel sanitation. So I know that's a super, super sexy topic, but something that's very important.
We might not be interviewing you on that, sorry.
So that's how I went through that process. But throughout, like in and around that, I had a lot of job changes and eventually made it to Napa and making fine wine. And so I, in a sense, accomplished my goal. But what I realized along the way is I didn't have to have the Master of Wine to do that. And then achieving the Master of Wine became more of a personal goal versus a career goal for me. So.
Did you know that no women before you had earned that title or certification, I guess?
Well, as far as winemakers go, there were several women here in the U.S. Like I think Mary Ewan Mulligan was the first woman in the U.S. to become a Master of Wine, and she's a very famous educator and author and accomplished person, and so she was definitely one of my key mentors through the whole program. But it really wasn't until right before I found out I had passed that I realized that there were no other women winemakers in the U.S. that had it.
Wow.
And I realized I was like, wow, I'm going to be the first woman winemaker here in the U.S. It might be in North America, but I feel safer saying the U.S. So it's amazing to believe that the program's been around so long. But I mean, if you look at the number of women winemakers as compared to the regular population of winemakers, there's a pretty small fraction to begin with, and then it's an even smaller fraction of those folks that are trying for the Master of Wine. So it makes sense that it would be a while before that happened, but I was just excited to be the first person and hopefully paving the way for other women behind me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
So, we're talking about women. Were there any obstacles along your, professional journey that you had to overcome being a woman and working in the wine industry that's predominantly male dominated?
Yeah, it's funny because when I was younger, I didn't notice it as much, but as I've gotten older, I'm starting to be more aware of these things. And then I look back on when I was younger and I was like, oh, that was probably something that wasn't okay. But I just never even thought about it when I was younger. And, but the part of it is, having ideas and having the knowledge that I have and saying, okay, this is what I think we should do, and then having a group of people totally ignore you, that type of thing is pretty common, and it's very sad. But I've definitely run into that. I've run into boys clubs where there's just a group of people that are really entrenched and they don't want to allow any outsiders in. I've had people in meetings tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about. There's been very blatant obvious things, and then there's been more subtle things where people have said, oh, that's nice that you're trying to do that, like kind of the proverbial pat on the head. So you just run into it and you have to kind of just let it roll off your back. And for the longest time, I was never really comfortable with people pigeonholing me into the woman winemaker category, because as a woman, as a winemaker, I want to be known as a great winemaker, period, not just a great winemaker that happens to be a woman. But what I realized, I was at a women's conference, a women's leadership conference many years ago, and I brought that point up, that is like, why can't we start having this conversation about just being winemakers and not women winemakers or male wine, and
Yeah.
One of the other women stood up and she said, you have to understand that you are still blazing the trail for people coming behind you, because there's so few women, and you have to be proud of the fact that you're a woman in this industry that's still male dominated, and we all behind you are looking to you as a role model. And so we want you to embrace that role. And it was really a very eye-opening conversation for me, because I had never thought about it like that before. I'd always thought about it in terms of, well, I don't want to be seen as a woman winemaker because I want my work to speak for itself. But I had never thought about it in a way that said, if I am proud and talking about myself as a woman winemaker, then that makes other women more excited to be and aspire to be in roles like I was in. So I started looking at more of a mentoring type situation than how people were seeing me as a winemaker.
Yeah, and if you look at the media and some of the coverage that they're giving, I mean, right now, in pretty much all categories, it's not just the wine industry, but it's across the board, where it's all about minorities or even women entrepreneurs, things like that they're kind of changing a little bit the narrative to focus more. I think profiling people that can become role models for a younger generation that, I don't want to say will have it easier, but certainly compared to our generation.
Well, I think it's a matter, like, I hear it talked a lot about when you're talking about BIPOC winemakers and people in the industry as well, is like, you need representation. People need to be able to visualize themselves in that role. Otherwise, we all have these kind of mental blocks that, like, okay, what does a doctor look like? That immediately brings up like this subconscious thing where you're like, okay, this is what we've all been conditioned to feel like a doctor looks like. I've had people say, why don't you dress more like a winemaker dresses? I'm like, I am a winemaker. It doesn't matter what I'm wearing. It's like, however I dress is how a winemaker dresses, it's I like my sequins and my earrings and stuff like that, so, but
Mine doesn't taste any different, does it?
No.
What you're wearing.
Exactly. So, I think it is that representation piece and being a very visible representation of women, and something that women can aspire to, especially younger women who are just getting into these fields.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that leads to the next question that we had was, so you're very much a trailblazer. So who influenced you on this journey? Who did you look to as your role model? And what did that bring to you in your journey to become a master of wine and a winemaker?
Sure. So from the winemaking side, I was really lucky to have some amazing male role models who did not see the female male thing, but just saw somebody who wanted to become a great winemaker. And so they didn't treat me any differently than they would have treated a man. And so I was super, super lucky to have that. And that started super early in my career with my first harvest. And, people who just let me loose in the cellar and taught me how to drive a tractor. And they were like, I'm one of the team. Let's just make this happen. I always point to Ed Killian, who was really one of the key mentors for me. He was the director of winemaking for Stuvrain, and he very much was a great role model and mentor for me because he set the boundaries and said, okay, you can do whatever you want in this zone. Here's a wine. You make that wine. You're 100% responsible for it. And I was just an assistant winemaker. But what it did is it allowed me to make decisions and come up with ideas and then bounce it off of him. And, if he thought it was a good idea, he's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. So it was he never had an ego to say it had to be all about him. And he was the only one who had to come up with ideas. Like it was very much a collaborative team effort. And I really appreciated that. And I grew a lot under him. One of the women that was really important in my career was Margot Van Stavern at Chateau St. Jean. And she was important not only from a winemaking perspective, but also from a balancing motherhood and winemaking. So she gave me a lot of amazing advice of like, how do you manage kids during harvest and what you should do when you're pregnant? And, because she had been there, and, those are questions that men can't answer for you. Like you have to find a woman to find those answers. And so she was really amazing through especially through my first pregnancy with my oldest son, and helping guide me through that. And she was the one who just he was born in the middle of harvest, and she just told me to go home. She was like, look, it's you're doing 3 weeks, just go home, enjoy this time. You're never going to get this period in your life back. There's always going to be another harvest. There's not going to be another point in your life where you have this time at the end of your pregnancy with your baby. And she was totally right. And I was trying to be all and do all and not let the team down, but she really pointed out that you can refocus and enjoy that last period.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you say that, because I just read on Instagram, and I forget now the name of this winemaker in Champagne. And so she, it's in the middle of her, she's pregnant, and has no help whatsoever. And I guess there's some kind of association, especially in France, where they help employees to get some associations that help you recruit people to work for you if you're unable to do so. But the administrative side of things takes so long that it's almost impossible for her to kind of meet that deadline. And so
Right.
It was friends of her that were sort of sending this message on Instagram just to see if there were anybody that could come out of the goodness of their heart to help her, because she's out there. The video is of her harvesting and about it, like I think a week away from giving birth or so. So it's horrible when things like that
It's hard.
happen.
It's really hard.
Very hard. Absolutely. I wanted to talk to you about that very interesting way that you have of looking at wine and giving personalities to different types of wines. Can you elaborate a little bit about, first of all, how did you come up with the concept, and
Sure.
how does that work?
Yeah, so personalities of wine. Originally, my website was purely a blog. Like I saw a blog post from Steve Heimoff back when he was still with Wine Enthusiast, way back when, I think it was 2009 or something like that. And it was posting about how winemakers should blog, because people want to hear what they have to say. They should blog. And I was like, all right, I think I can handle that. I didn't have kids yet at the time, and I hadn't gotten really into the MW studies yet. And I was like, all right, I'll try this. So I put up a post or site and started posting, and people responded really well to it. And part of the reasoning I wanted to blog was to try to eliminate the noise you get between winemakers and consumers when you add PR people and marketing and all of this stuff. And things tend to get blown out of proportion or over dramatized, and then sometimes that ends up with the consumer just being intimidated versus getting the point of things. So I wanted to try to come up with a way to describe wines to people in a very unintimidating way that they would understand, and then that they would feel comfortable exploring kind of tangential wines to whatever wine they enjoyed, you know. And one of the things I have on there is like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. If you're a person who likes a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, then here's that personality. And then if you like that, then you might also like Albarino. So it was kind of like a algorithm before the algorithms became a thing, but not automated. You know, it's something like, well, if you like this, then here's something else in a similar style that you should try. And so that's where the personalities came from. And I really just kind of sat there and thought about, okay, how many different personalities of wine are there and what do they kind of fall into? And so that's how I came up with the descriptions and everything. So yeah, it was really out of a desire to make wine less intimidating for people.
It's a great concept, and I think very approachable and fun, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your wine personality?
Ooh, I have made everything on that list. So currently our Trussell 31 Riesling is very much in the stony minerally category. It's really, a very restrained style. It's dry. It's just got a lot of flint, but still a lot of fruit. But it's really, really a beautiful wine. The Chardonnay we make, I would put it more in I wouldn't put it quite holistically in the buttery beauty category, but it's on that way there because it doesn't quite fit in the fruity category or the minerally category. But it's definitely a richer style of Chardonnay than you typically see from the Finger Lakes. And then of course my cabs out here in Napa are, the big bold reds. And so they're not the high octane, high alcohol styles, but they're, definitely a robust red. And so I run the gambit.
That's so cool. We like to end our interviews with a little fun question. And so we wanted to ask you, what is your wine pet peeve?
Ooh, wine pet peeve. I love this question. So one of the things that really is like nails on a chalkboard to me is when I hear marketing people call wine juice. And I hear it sometimes with distributors as well. They're like, oh, the juice in the bottle is really good. And I'm like, it hasn't been juice for a really long time. Like it's juice for like 2 days in the winery. And then after that, it's wine. And it drives me absolutely crazy. And I don't know where it comes from. And, but every time I hear that, I'm like, no, it's not juice. It's wine. And that's what it is. So that's definitely probably the biggest pet peeve I have. The other one, which is far lesser of an issue, is the concept between variety and varietal. Because some people refer to, they're like, oh, it's the Chardonnay varietal. No, varietal is an adjective and it means it's descriptive of that variety. Mm-hmm. If you're ever talking about a actual variety like Chardonnay or Cabernet Franc or Sauvignon Blanc, you're not talking about it in a descriptive term. It's a variety, not a varietal. And so remember, variety is the noun and varietal is the adjective. So that's a minor one, but it's one of those things you're like,
that's very interesting. Anne?
Well, one more question. Is there any question that we haven't asked you that we should have? And can you answer it?
Oh man, any question that I haven't answered? You haven't asked.
Or anything that you'd like our audience to know before we...
I will take a moment to talk a little bit about the Master Wine Program, because I know you mentioned like it's something you wanted to eventually do, but it's probably not something you're going to get to.
I think you turned me off a little bit to it right now. It sounds like trying to pass the bar.
Oh, no. So, I mean, it's accomplishable. I'm living proof of that. And the other key thing is, you just, if it's something you really want to do, you just find time. Even like, and what I see most of the time is the people who are the busiest going into the program are usually the ones that make it through the program. I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, I'm going to take 2 years off and I'm going to study only for the math. Like those people hardly ever make it all the way through. And I don't know why. I think it's if you have the discipline to be busy in your normal everyday life, you have the discipline to find a way to make this program fit into your life. So I always discourage people from going, oh, I'm just too busy. I'm never going to be able to do that. The other thing is, I think a lot of people are afraid of failing. You know, maybe they've never failed anything in their life. Maybe they've, you know, made it all the way through school and all the way through the WSET programs, and they've never failed a single thing. And so this concept of failure is like, oh, that would be the worst thing ever. And one of the things that I really had to come to terms with throughout my time in the program is I failed a lot. I know a lot of different ways to fail that exam. And what I realized by my third attempt is the failure was not what I was worried about anymore. What I was worried about was success. What I was afraid of what was going to happen on the other side if I was successful. And I had to really come to terms with that. So a lot of people, you know, I see them get hung up on, oh, I don't want to fail anything. And they get scared and they just don't want to start because they don't want to fail. But then there's this other fear that most people don't talk about, which is the fear of what happens if I do really well and do get on the other side of it. And so I think that's true for a lot of things in life, and not just the MW program. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm writing a book on overcoming failure and how that can lead to greater and greater things in your life. And that is something that a lot of people ask me about, because they're like, you came back after failing and failing out and then failing again, you know, like, so I feel like a lot of people request me as a mentor who have issues with that type of thing, not so much the knowledge of the program, but how do you get over the mental block that it takes to get through the exam. And that I see is a big thing.
That's great. And so when is
that sounds like a fascinating book. Oh, sorry, Ron.
No, I was just asking, when is the book coming out? Are you halfway through it, or?
I'm halfway through writing it. I don't have a publisher or an agent yet, so I'm working on that. So if anybody has any leads on that, that would be great. But I am halfway through writing it. So,
well, you know, congratulations, and best of luck with completion of this book. I will certainly buy a copy because I totally relate to what you just said. So,
yeah. It's multi. You know, it's not just about the MW program, it's about life in general and everybody who struggles with those things.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that you're going to have a lot of people wanting to buy that book.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you make me feel a little bit better about Master of Wine. Not sure I'm still going to do it. Just finishing the second half of diploma. So I'll get there.
Yeah,
but,
get through diploma.
Better about it. But we really appreciate your time today, and it's been wonderful to talk to you.
Absolutely.
And learn about your journey and about the next steps. It's just been wonderful and fantastic, and we look forward to speaking to you again and reading your book.
All right, great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Nova. Thank you.
Thank you.